think the captains on the pirate ships were asking themselves is, am I the type of captain that my crew would choose as his leader today? Interestingly, pirate ships were organized in such a way that the crew could choose the captain. And the captain could also be removed quite easily if the crew was not satisfied. And so it brings up the question of, what if my crew had the chance to remove me at any point in time? I think that brings to focus the importance of making sure that we are creating the conditions for people to thrive in the work that they do.
Hey teammates, it's me, Kay Wright. We're recording live here from the SparkX cell, the innovation lab on Joint Base Andrews. I'm super excited about today's episode of The New Normal because I have joining me today Dr. Francesca Gino. Now, Dr. Gino is a behavioral scientist. She is a professor at the Harvard Business School, and she is the author of the book, Rebel Talent: How to Break the Rules at Work and in Life. This is an amazing, amazing book, and I'm really looking forward to learning more from Dr. Gino about how to be a rebel, as well as how to deal with some of the challenging times that we're all faced during this new normal. Welcome, Dr. Gino.
It's great to be talking to you. Is the background, oh, that's real. I was like, there are real people over there.
Yeah. I'm actually in, we have an innovation lab. We call it SparkX cell on Andrews Air Force Base. So we're recording live from there.
Oh, that's awesome.
Now, one of the things that I think could really come of this situation is, people will have, in some instances, more time to be creative and innovative. Any thoughts or ideas about things that people can do while we're on lockdown, while people are in quarantine or teleworking, on how they can be more creative?
Yeah, so to me, it's a good opportunity to take a step back and rethink work, if you will, and rethink opportunities that we all have to actually use our creative juices. Sometimes constraints can be quite good in enhancing our creativity. There is some good research on that. And so I would imagine that a moment like this one is going to help at least some people pause and think about, maybe there were aspects of my job that I didn't quite like, but as it turns out, I can be creative and reshape those aspects. And as I said, in a way that nobody would want to experience, but this gave us that opportunity to rethink life at work or life more generally.
Yeah. Let's switch gears for a second and let's talk about your book, Rebel Talent: How to Break the Rules at Work and in Life. So I really enjoyed this read. And I was wondering if you could just give our audience a quick summary of maybe the 5 qualities that you believe rebels possess.
Absolutely. So for over 15 years now, I've been looking at people who break the rules, but in constructive ways. And these are really people who create positive change in their organizations and in their life. And what is interesting is that no matter where I looked for them or where I found them, they seem to have 5 characteristics that I call rebel talents. One is the talent for novelty. Rather than going for what's familiar and comfortable, which is a very natural tendency that we all do and have and share, rebels tend to go for the uncomfortable. So they stretch themselves, they think about always doing something new and novel. That, yes, comes with discomfort, but they become comfortable with the uncomfortable. The second talent is the talent for curiosity. This is a really interesting one because we're all born with it. And in fact, if you look at the data, curiosity peaks at the age of 4 and 5, but then declines steadily from there. And what tends to happen for most of us is that we get used to the usual ways of working. And so rebels are people who come to work and to their life with the same type of curiosity and sense of wonder and interest in keep asking questions that we used to have when we were little kids. Then there is a talent for perspective. What that means is approaching problem situation from all sorts of angles and views. And again, relying on that talent means fighting against the human tendencies, because most of us tend to come to work and situation with just one view, which is usually our own perspective. Then there is a talent for authenticity. Most people tend to conform to the views and opinions and behaviors of others, and rebels instead have the courage of showing their own preferences, bringing their contributions forward. And finally, rebels have a talent for diversity. So rather than accepting social roles and stereotypical views that society often passes on us, they break away from that. And they really leverage differences in a way that is rather positive. In fact, one of the examples that I use in the book in talking about the talent for diversity is an organization that comes a little bit out of the left field, but it's pirate ships in the 16th century. And what is really interesting about them is that at the time when it was about 200 years before slavery ended in the United States, they were the most diverse organization on the planet. They were hiring people not because of race or gender, but because of their skills and their commitment to the mission. So they get a lot of credit in my mind.
Yeah. How do you think rebel talent is something that people are born with? Is it something that we develop over time? And can we work on these? Can people become better at being rebels in a constructive manner?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I am still learning how to be an effective rebel. Part of the reason why I was so excited about sharing these stories and writing the book and continue following different rebels is that I think we all have that opportunity to rely on our talents more often. And in fact, you can even turn it around, and as leaders, we have the opportunity, maybe also the responsibility of creating conditions where others bring their talents out more often. In fact, there is a quote that I often mention by an Italian artist and sculptor, Michelangelo Buonarroti. He thought about the sculpting process as one where you take something beautiful and you sculpt it out of the piece of rock or stone that you're working with. And I think that the same thing is true of people. What if, as leader, we all have that type of mindset, or even as colleagues, and we help others bring their talents out by creating the right conditions, by doing the right type of sculpting for them.
Yeah, I like when one of your qualities is curiosity, and I like the story that you told about. I think it was your son when he was 4 or 5. And he
Absolutely.
wanted to put some color in his milk. Tell us about that and how it impacted your husband at the time.
It was really interesting. He was up for breakfast, a regular morning, and Alex is sitting at the counter next to a bowl of cereal and milk. Very pensive. My husband went to him, remember there are eggs? And my husband knew exactly what Alex was talking about. So he went to the cabinet, brought the bottles back to him and said, Alex, what are you going to do with them? And Alex smiled with that perfect smile of a 4-year-old who has an incredible plan. And he said, I'm going to color my milk. And it was really interesting to see the puzzled face that he got from my husband as a reaction to that. And my husband said, Alex, we don't do that. And Alex looked at him and said, why not? And my husband looked even more puzzled. And at that point, he turned to me and said, Mommy, we don't do that, right? And as we were having this heated conversation about whether it's right or wrong to have color in your milk, Alex had opened up the bottle of red coloring, put red coloring in his milk, and all of a sudden his cereals were swimming happily in pink milk. And it was just this beautiful realization of what we do when we're children. We push boundaries, we experiment, we ask all sorts of questions, we're curious. And it's sad that that curiosity over time disappears. And I was very interested in understanding why. And also I thought maybe the data is not complete. Maybe when we get to the job that we love, curiosity pops back up. And I have to tell you, I was wrong. I collected the data on hundreds of people, different jobs, different industries, different parts of the world. And what it is I show, I think is quite interesting. At first, when you start a job or a new role or a new position, curiosity is pretty high. And then you go back to the same people 8, 9 months later, at least in my data, curiosity had dropped at least 20% across the board. So there is
Wow.
something that we're doing as leader, as managers, as peers, that really shut curiosity down. And that's a problem. And it's a missed opportunity because so much goodness comes with curiosity. So my
Yeah.
hope is that the current crisis actually is going to trigger more questions for people and more curiosity rather than letting them just get used to the usual way of working.
Yeah, I hope so. I think this is something that's very interesting because, you know, in the Air Force, from the very top, from a leadership perspective, we promote, and I'm sure you saw with your work with the Air Force, we promote innovation, we promote curiosity, and our youngest generation of airmen, kind of like Alex, are asking questions. Hey, why can't I put red coloring in my milk? But we have a little bit of a challenge with the people that are experienced, that are in that middle. Sometimes we refer to them as the frozen middle. So what advice do you have for both of those, the young people who are trying to be curious and break through and be innovative, and that layer of folks who are saying, no, let's just keep doing it the way that we've always done it?
Yeah. So as you were mentioning, some of my work I wrote about, it became an HBS case study about a Squadron 99 in the Air Force, uh, 3 hours in a base
Mm-hmm.
3 hours north of San Francisco. And what was really interesting, and the reason why I was so excited to write about that group, is that a leader came in and said, if we want to win the next war, we need to do things differently. And what I love about that leader and the way he went to really make sure that everybody in his squadron was thriving and felt empowered to do things differently is that I meet a lot of leaders across all sorts of organizations that say, you know what, there is this part of the culture that I don't quite like, or I think that some of our processes should be different from the way they are today. And then they throw their hands up in the air and they say, but it's not for me. Clearly, the change must come down from the top. And what this leader was doing instead is really understanding his span of control. He understood that he had
Mm-hmm.
influence over his squadron, and that's where he started making changes. And that, I think, is important because no matter where you sit in the organization, we're all actors of change. If we think about the people that we get to work with, the people that we have influence over, the people who we make decisions with, we have lots of opportunities of doing things better, engaging them differently if we actually rely on these 5 rebel talents. So it might be a little bit harder or a longer process, but I've seen it work in so many organizations where, again, people who are not at the top are really embracing these ideas and using them to bring about positive change. Now, what I've also seen, especially when those people are the one talking to the frozen middle, is that sometimes out of frustration, really, because you're not seeing things change quickly enough, you lose perspective. And so I think in that case, you might take your curiosity too far, or you're pushing too far in a way to become destructive rather than constructive. So I would put particular attention on perspective and making sure that you're coming in with an approach that is really core to improv comedy rather than shutting down the ideas that already are in existence. Try to find a gem and constructively build on those ideas or processes in a way that move us forward more positively.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. You know, it also speaks to you write a little bit about expertise versus experimentation, and
Mm-hmm.
how sometimes having too much experience can hinder problem solving. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I was struck by the fact that in some of the research that I was working on, I was seeing that expertise or experience that we've accumulated is used as a way that as a signal that we know it all. And in a sense, I understand it, especially when we're under pressure. We just go to the experience and use it for whatever it is that we are working on. And in fact, in one of the studies that I really love, that I'm going to simplify, We saw this in the context of open heart surgery. So we had millions of data points over a 15-year period of surgeon doing surgeries over their patients. And we were able to explore the fact that the FDA came out with an announcement that the technology used in many surgeries was not good for patients. And so here you have a situations where clearly changing your behavior is going to benefit the people you're trying to help. And what we saw in the data is that the most experienced and senior the surgeon was, the less likely they were to change their behavior after the announcement. So perfect case study and evidence that, again, experience in a sense can blind us to the fact that there are new ways of doing. And then I met a rebel who did something incredible back in 2009. This is Captain Sally Sullenberger, the
Yeah.
person who beached a plane in the Hudson River with 155 passengers on board. Quite
Mhm.
creative solution under a lot of pressure, under a situation where most of us would just go to the most obvious answer, which is probably land at the closest airport. And when I reached out to him and I was able to interview him, what I discovered is that by the time the accident happened, he had a lot of experience under his belt. He had served in the military, so he had experience flying all
Yeah.
sorts of
He's an Air
planes.
Force guy. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. He had served as a volunteer, studied previous accidents, so he had a lot of information about what can go wrong on planes. Over 30,000 of hours of flying experience, so really an expert. And yet, every time he walked into the cockpit, he would ask himself a very simple question. What do I stand to learn today? How is it that this flight could be different? And it was just a wonderful habit of keeping perspective broad, despite the fact that he had a lot of experience. So when experience and expertise come with that level of humility, wonderful, because you're going to be able to really stay true to this idea of having a broad perspective.
Yeah. And it sounds like he stayed curious as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Rebel talent is rare. Why? Why is it so rare?
Part of it is that if we think about our human nature, we have tendencies that push in the opposite direction. In fact, part of the reason why I love the label rebel is that in order to be authentic, be curious, go for novelty, it requires us to fight our human nature. And so that's why we don't see it as often as we could.
Yeah. So any advice for, because when most of us as leaders, when we hear that term rebel, we we don't necessarily think of positive thoughts, or this is someone that we want to hire
Yeah,
or support
you're
or
being
work with.
polite. We usually think about that annoying colleague that always slows us down or put all sorts of obstacles as we're trying to accomplish things. So absolutely, that's the view that we usually have. And yes,
Yeah.
those people exist in all sorts of businesses and companies, but the ones I wanted to follow up with and focus on are the ones who are being constructive. People who are breaking rules, who hold them and others back in a way that is very positive for the organization. And so it's quite interesting to try to understand what our starting point might be. And so I created an assessment that is a free assessment. So if people are interested in taking it, it's called the Rebel Test, and it's
Uh-huh.
available at rebeltalents.org. And it gives you a name of which type of rebel you are, but also some feedback. Given your profile, what is it that you could keep your attentions going forward if you want to embrace these ideas more often?
All right. Well, I'm going to take that today, and I'll let you know what my results are.
Wonderful. I
Yeah.
think being a rebel, or at least trying to learn how to be an effective rebel, is very empowering because it really makes you change the way you look back at work, but also back at your own life. And to me, one of the questions that all this research, all this work brought to my mind, that is really a question that I think the captains on the pirate ships were asking themselves is, am I the type of captain that my crew would choose as his leader today? interestingly, pirate ships were organized in such a way that the crew could choose the captain. And the captain could also be removed quite easily if the crew was not satisfied. And so it brings up the question of, what if my crew had the chance to remove me at any point in time? I think
Yeah.
that that brings to focus the importance of making sure that we are creating the conditions for people to thrive in the work that they do. And it might be hard at the time of crisis because we have so many thoughts on our mind, and also many distractions that are good distractions, our own families, our own children's, people we care for. But I think it's important to not forget to check in with our people, to make sure that we ask them what's on their mind, and to make sure that we help them use this moment and turn it, to the extent that is possible, into an opportunity.
Yeah, no, I agree. This is probably um, the most important time to build relationships and to build trust with everything
Absolutely.
that's happening in people's lives. What concerns you most coming out of this? At some point, we'll return back to some level of normalcy. What concerns you most, and what things that are happening now do you think we should keep? For example, I know you're doing a lot of remote teaching that you may not have done. Is there anything that you think like, wow, we should keep doing this, and kind of what do you think we should focus on as we come out of this?
Yeah. So the crisis can be very paralyzing. If I wake up in the morning and start thinking about all the people who are suffering in this crisis, you almost feel as if you can't take any actions. But then I always try to take perspective and say, what are the opportunities to do things differently to the extent you can? And I can tell you that this can come in small bits and pieces. I was teaching this semester a class to a remarkable group of 130 MBA students at HBS, and we went online. And so I started asking questions. Maybe there is a way of delivering the content in a way that is even better than what I had planned for class. So a treasure hunt that we had planned to have on campus to talk through how to best collaborate across differences became a puzzle challenge, like an escape room online, that allow us to actually look at patterns in language that the students were using and how that was linked to performance. And so what I'm hoping is that in this moment of crisis, people are going to keep perspective to the extent possible, and thinking about ways in which we might not be able to go about life in the usual way, but we might still have opportunity to do the things that we do and do them well. And I was not in the same spot with my students in the classroom when we ended, but I feel that everyone felt that we were connected. And that came down to a lot of virtual coffee and virtual conversations, or paying attention to students who seem to be a little bit checked out, and checking in with them to make sure that they stayed on course.
Yeah. How about for this is a challenge I spoke to someone about yesterday for your kids. So one of the things that I think before this, we wanted to limit the screen time for our kids, but now that school and just like we do virtual coffee and virtual happy hour, I think our children have an opportunity to connect virtually with their friends that they can no longer meet at the playground or whatever. How is that balance, and any advice for helping our children work through these
Yeah.
times?
So I am a mom of four. So my oldest is 7, and my youngest is now 5 months old. And so
Oh
I
man.
have a lot of questions related to that on my mind as well. And what I've been trying to do is try to meet my children at the age they're at. So my 7-year-old loves to play cards, whether it's Uno or even chess or Pokemon battles with his friends. And as it turns out, with a little bit of creativity, you can repeat the same experience on Zoom. Or in light of social distancing, there is a friend of his who lives just at the end of the street. He came over, and we have a fence, and they were sitting showing each other's cards, but still trying to play and to connect that way. So
Yeah.
once again, I think it's a situation that requires a lot of creativity. But one of the things that I've learned pretty soon, finding myself to homeschool with the help of my husband and having the kids at home, is to be okay with imperfection. There is some interesting data that shows that, especially in the United States, over the last 20 years, the desire to be a perfectionist kept on rising. I think this is a moment to just give ourselves a pat in the back for all that we're taking on, having 5 different jobs and all
Yeah.
sorts of responsibility, and be okay if things are not as perfect as we would like them to be. We all have flaws, we all have imperfections, and that's what makes us human. And I think that starting with that mindset can be quite healthy.
Yeah. So you're an educator. So helping people, and maybe it may be different with your children, may come a little bit natural to you as an educator. What about the novice, the person, the airman, or the person who has no experience in teaching or education, but are now suddenly thrown into this situation where they have to help with homeschooling? Any advice?
I would say patience, and try to make it, to the extent that is possible, try to make it interesting to the child. One of the things that I love my husband for is his ability of turning anything that he does into an opportunity for learning. So for example, let's imagine that he's making pasta from scratch, which is something that happened last night. He was asking Alex, our son, to help with the measuring, and he was creating some math in the process of preparing dinner. And so I think that there are opportunities like that that make the child realize that learning these skills is actually helpful because it helps you make dinner. Or they went around the house. Another activity that I really love, we repurposed our little yard and we bought a swing set so that there was more running around, which is quite healthy if you have that opportunity or that space. And so he was the one helping, writing a map, doing the measuring, and he was really proud of himself when the swing set arrived, and he actually was the right fit for the space that we had. So we all had great imaginations and curiosity when we were little. Let's use it now. And if we don't have right answers, saying back to the child, how is it that you would get to the answer for this
Yeah,
problem?
good. One of the things that we also talk about is how to stay resilient during these times, and from a physical, from a mental, from a spiritual, and a social standpoint. So what are you and Greg and the kids doing these days to try to stay resilient in these difficult times?
So one of the things that we do, which I love, I grew up in a family that always ate together at the table, and it's rituals that we have at night, in the evening when we're having dinner. But what we're doing right now, and making sure that everybody has answers to this, is going around the table and really ask the question of what are we grateful for that happened today, and what it is that I learned today, and what it is that happened that made us laugh or smile. And sometimes, especially the younger, one of my daughters who's almost 3, the other day said, what I realized today is that it's really cool that I was born in this family. And you can
Wow.
have a really simple statement that just make you look at the day, despite the fact that it might have been hard to put the clothes on her 2 hours earlier, but make you appreciate the meaning of what we're living through, but also make you appreciate the small things that bring joy to the life that we have.
Yeah, well, that's certainly great advice, and I know many of our viewers will take that to heart. Doc, it's been great. I really want to thank you. I'm going to encourage my viewers to take the assessment, the Rebel assessment. Is it rebeltalent.org, at rebeltalent.org?
Rebel Talents with an S.org.
Rebeltalents.org. So Thanks a lot. And the next time I'm on campus, I come up on occasion. Maybe we can meet for an Italian coffee.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That'd be great. So we really appreciate it, and I look forward to speaking to you next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.